Hey guys, how are you? Just gonna give it a few minutes and see who shows up. I hope everybody's had a great week. Ooh, okay. Hopefully my volume's okay. Just double check. Check. All right, perfect. All right, so today I'm going to talk about the murder of Carol Jenkins. Hi Juliet, how are you? I hope you've had a great Friday. Today we're going to talk about the murder of Carol Jenkins and dive into sundown towns. I'm not sure if this will be the only video that I do about sundown towns, being that they still exist and it's 2022. And they're in all of the states. Hey, stranger. That mute button and you're going to be fighting soon. But I hope everybody's had a great Friday. All right, so how's my volume? Everything okay? You guys hear me good? I hate it because I have to tear down my area and then put everything back up. So I always have to move everything around again. And I never know if everything's back in the right spot. All right. All right, so let me go off here and so I can start talking. Give me 1 second to pull up all my stuff. Hey, Victoria. So I'm going to see if I can share. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 sec. I'm just trying to pull up all my notes so I don't have to keep digging for them. I thought I had them all ready. All right. So, get this fixed. Carol Jenkins was born to Elizabeth Jenkins in Franklin, Indiana in 1947. Her mother had divorced her father when Carol was still an infant. Elizabeth would later marry Paul Davis, a local factory worker in nearby Rushville. Paul raised Carol as his own, while he and Elizabeth would go on to have 5 more children, all of whom looked up to Carol as their big sister. As a teenager, Carol wanted to move to Chicago and become a model. In 1965, shortly after graduating from Rushville High School, she got a job at the plant of the Philco division of the Ford Motor Company. Carol worked there until a union strike temporarily shut the plant down. Looking to supplement her income, she took a job as a door-to-door saleswoman for Collier's, selling encyclopedias. Carol Jenkins arrived in Martinsville, Indiana on September 16th, 1968, dressed in a white cotton turtleneck, a pair of olive green wool pants, a brown jacket, and a bright yellow scarf. She was completely excited for her first day of work. It was a foggy and damp afternoon. And although no one really got to know her well, 30 years later, most of Martinsville knew of Carol Jenkins' short young life. She was shy, polite, and a very pretty woman. To impress her boss, she had volunteered to go to Martinsville, Indiana. Martinsville was known to be a sundown town, but Carol thought that she would be safe that evening, as she would be traveling there with 3 co-workers, 2 of them white men, and a 19-year-old black woman. While she was on her route, 2 white men in a car began following her. They were catcalling and hurling racist slurs at her. As she rushed around through the neighborhood, she still kept being followed by them. Now, it was only a little after 4:30 p.m. And even though they knew that it was a sundown town, they thought that they would have had plenty of time to go through the neighborhood. Carol was unfortunately by herself because all of them had split up, thinking that they could knock out the neighborhood quickly. They had all agreed to meet back up at 10 o'clock at a gas station that wasn't too far from the town square. As Carol was going through the neighborhoods is when she noticed this car that kept following her around. And as the car kept getting closer and closer and screaming slurs at her, she arrived about 7:30 at the door of a couple. The couple was named Dawn and Norma Neal. She apologetically explained that she was frightened and that some men in a dark sedan were following her and had yelled at her. When Don Neal went outside, he didn't see the car she had described, but an unfamiliar light-colored sedan was parked near his house. The car's parking lights were on, but he couldn't see the occupants. He approached and got close enough to make a mental note of the license number. As he returned to the house, the car drove away. The Neals telephoned the Martinsville Police Department, which dispatched a patrolman who stuck around for about 10 minutes. It was only long enough for Carol to repeat her story. After he departed, Norma Neal drove Carol around the neighborhood for several minutes in an unsuccessful effort to spot one of the other salespeople. Back at the Neals, Carol turned down their offer to remain with them until it was time to rejoin her colleagues. They said that they had tried to get her to stay, but she said that she had been a bother long enough. Norma Neal had told a reporter. And that sounds like her, Paul Davis said, and that's her stepfather. I always felt like she was a very sweet, sort of naive girl. She had a smile for everybody. She never was in no kind of trouble. Never gave me no trouble. Carol didn't like imposing on anybody. Around 8, she thanked the Neals and she departed. Not quite an hour later, 10 blocks away, near the corner of Morgan and Lincoln, a block shy of her destination, she collapsed on the sidewalk. A teenage boy who lived across the street discovered her and ran into a nearby restaurant to call the police. She was alive when they arrived, but dead shortly after an ambulance delivered her to the Morgan County Hospital. Only then was her brown wool jacket removed and her barely blood-stained white turtleneck sweater revealing a single stab wound on the left side of her chest. The next day, Paul Davis broke his vow, and he had returned to Martinsville, where he paid a visit to the office of the Morgan County coroner, who had already conducted an autopsy. The killer had punctured her heart. So, this is where, unfortunately, I feel awful because Carol had such a short life and she had such huge dreams of becoming a fashion designer. And her death was not at all handled how it should have been. Second, y'all. So, once they found her, by the teenage boy, which he had heard somebody screaming is why he went outside. They never arrested anybody. They never created a crime scene. There were a whole crowd of people around that area. They never taped it off. People were picking up her notebooks, glasses. One person found her notebook down the street, about a half a block from the crime scene, at an auto body shop. Nothing was handled the way it should have been. So, Paul Davis, which was her stepfather, but really her father because he raised her, he went on to, this was him kind of interviewing and talking with a reporter. In the years since, the mystery of how Carol Jenkins died has competed with the mystery of why the whodunit has never been solved. The official investigation had, at best, an auspicious beginning. The Martinsville Police Department employed no detective-grade personnel, so the county sheriff and the Indiana State Police were summoned immediately, which turned out to be too late. Not the least complication was that the crime scene had not been secured, mainly because it wasn't clear that a crime had occurred until Carol was examined at the hospital. Her wound, she literally died from one stab wound with a screwdriver to the heart. And when the ambulance arrived, they didn't take off her jacket. They didn't examine her or anything to see what could be wrong. So nobody knew she even had this stab wound. So it wasn't even nobody even knew what happened until she was at the hospital, which by then it's done and over with. They said there were 50 people around the crime scene. It was raining also. And it said that the dark-colored automobile that had been trailing her before she sought refuge with the Neals was tracked down. Its teenage driver and a friend admitted that they followed Carol but denied having yelled at her. And then before long, the police decided that they had no suspects because Don Neal hadn't accurately remembered the license number of the light-colored sedan. That lead never went anywhere, and no murder weapon was ever found. So out-of-town journalists who came to Martinsville discovered that information was remarkably hard to come by. The town became a clam. A Indianapolis news reporter told me that they got the impression really quick that there was something funny. I began knocking on doors to see if anyone had seen this girl, and I got nothing from the townspeople. After a while, we learned that nothing was going to happen. And even if somebody knew something, they were afraid to talk. They really didn't want outsiders coming around. It cooled and cooled until it was futile. So we ended up just making routine calls. And when you called, you got the standard, the investigation is continuing. You knew if anything was going to happen, it would have to be an anonymous tip. After a while, it just petered out. Well, not exactly. 6 weeks after the murder, by which time there had been an accumulation of news stories bearing headlines like "No Promising Leads in Murder Probe" and "Clues Motives Scarce in Martinsville Slain," and "Police Put Lid on Fatal Stabbing Case." The Indianapolis chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People sent a telegram to the Attorney General, Ramsey Clark, requesting an investigation by the Department of Justice. The telegram stated that Morgan County has historically been associated with the Ku Klux Klan activities. This was, of course, true, and indeed the previous year, in the summer of 1967, a Klan motorcade had made a newsworthy tour of several central Indiana towns, which culminated in Martinsville. There, on the courthouse square, 30 or so robed Klansmen carried placards and distributed literature. The Indianapolis Star reported that the group's spokesman said Martinsville was chosen for a demonstration because there is a strong local chapter in Morgan County. Which is not to say that any of the Klansmen actually lived in Martinsville or that anyone from Martinsville had joined the motorcade. Whether this episode had any connection to the murder was as much a matter of conjecture as most of the other elements of the case. The federal government never undertook a formal investigation, but the NAACP request helped plant in the minds of people, especially Black people, in Indiana and beyond, the belief that the Jenkins murder was racially motivated and that no one should be surprised that it had taken place where it did. The first anniversary of the crime was the occasion for feature stories of the "Anybody Know Carol's Killer" variety. After that, more than 3 decades went by with virtually no substantial media coverage. Still, the crime had lodged in the collective memory of people who could never quite stop speculating about it. The prime suspect, a construction worker whose whereabouts on the night of the murder were unknown, left the state not long afterward, and it was said later died in a shootout in Illinois. Another suspect had been the owner of the auto repair shop near where Carol's notebook was found, a circumstance that gave rise to a widely held screwdriver as murder weapon theory. Both men were among several to whom the police administered polygraphs, and all, quote unquote, passed, which, given the fallibility of polygraphs, proved and disproved nothing. Talking amongst themselves, Martinsville residents named names. Often these conversations took place after a few drinks, and beyond Martinsville, the scuttlebutt was that the police were unwilling or too inept to make the case, a point of view that in time the victim's family subscribed to. What stray facts and factoids have surfaced across the years have tended to deepen rather than illuminate the mystery. After Paul and Elizabeth Davis divorced, she married a man named Gene Scott, and they adopted an infant named Philip. In 1998, Philip Scott, by then 30 years old, went to see his half-sister, Laura Davis Watkins, Paul's youngest child, and told her that through friends he had met people who knew who had killed Carol and how. They took him to somebody's house in Martinsville, Laura told me. They said everybody in Martinsville knows who killed her. He said he was amazed at how much these people knew, but for whatever reason, Philip wouldn't tell us any more than that. Actually, Philip did convey one other piece of information. The murder weapon could be found in an underground gasoline tank at the site of the long-defunct auto repair shop. Laura's brother, Robert, contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and soon Paul Davis heard from a Martinsville police detective. When a few months later, the gas tank was unearthed, a chisel was found inside, but it didn't match the dimensions of the fatal wound. Two years later, the family received another provocative tip from a woman who refused to give her name. She had been 6 years old at the time of the murder, she said, but she knew what had... Roxy, Sorry, guys. No, they don't. No, 9-9. 2 years later, the family received another provocative tip from a woman who refused to give her name. She had been 6 years old at the time of the murder, but she knew what had happened because she had heard about it from her father. The scenario she described involved more than one guilty party as well as a screwdriver. When Paul asked for her name and phone number, she said, "I'm sorry, I have a family. I fear for my life." She never called back again. Another one of Paul's sons got in touch with the FBI, and again a Martinsville detective followed up. By then, the summer of 2000, Paul had long since become disaffected with both the Martinsville police and the state police, who he felt had for years arbitrarily withheld information from him. So he hired his own private detective, a former state trooper named William McAllister. It took McAllister about 5 minutes, he told me recently, to ascertain that the prime suspect, the construction worker, had not died in Illinois, but was alive and living in Florida. Coincidentally, as McAllister was getting to work, the Indiana State Police were mobilizing a new investigative unit devoted to old homicides, and 2 detectives were assigned full-time to the Jenkins case. Now think about that. She passed away, or she was murdered in 1968. and it's 2000, and they're just now assigning 2 detectives for her case. It's disgusting. That fall, Paul Davis, accompanied by an attorney and some other family members, made one more trip to Martinsville for a meeting with the new team. Eventually, Paul became persuaded of the detective's sincerity, and he authorized McAllister to share his files with them. The past summer, when they had been working on the case for more than a year, the Morgan County prosecutor decided to publicize the reopening of the investigation. When I asked the prosecutor, Steve Senega, for a prognosis, he said, "I think we're making progress, but I'm not willing to say how much because I really don't know. I think people think that if this case is going to be solved, now is the best time." In fact, the best time would have been in the fall of 1968, when the physical evidence was fresh, potential witnesses were available, and memories were less impeachable. The suspect in Florida, after initially refusing to cooperate, has reportedly become more talkative, but only in the interest of exculpating himself. Shy of an outright confession, any defendant convicted at this point would have to be approximately as unlucky as Carol Jenkins. Paul Davis seems far less interested in the formality of a trial than he does in finding some peace. Once they figure out who committed the crime, I don't know what they do about it, he said. But once I find out, then that will bring the family and me closure. We just want to know who done it and why. I pray every night that something comes, maybe some new DNA, because if they don't get some new concrete evidence, this guy is still going to be walking around free in Martinsville or wherever he is. But even solving the murder can't solve Martinsville's problem. It'll just help to take a little of the pressure off them that's been on them for so many years. To solve their problem, they're going to have to diversify. They're going to have to make it where Black people can come in there, living, working, and not having fear. 4 years ago, and this was in, give me one sec, y'all. 2001, so 1997. So in 1997, one second. So in 1997, Martinsville attracted a lot of national publicity, once again, none of it desirable, in the wake of a high school basketball game. A team with several Black players came to town from Bloomington, and afterwards its fans complained that they had been subjected to racial taunting and to dirty play on the court. One Black Bloomington player wound up on the floor retching after being violently elbowed. The subsequent punishment levied by the Indiana High School Athletic Association was a 1-year probation, which, among other things, forbade all Martinsville interscholastic teams to host conference home games. It still provokes eliminations in Martinsville about unfairness and humiliation, not to mention that the out-of-town coverage inevitably dragged in references to the Klan and the Carol Jenkins murder. So that was in 2001, right before it came out that they actually did catch her murderer. Hi, Care Bear. Sorry, guys, I can't see the chat when I'm reading. I love you guys. So, this was, I believe, Give me 1 second. Okay, so that article where they talked to her stepfather was in 2001. And in 2002, 34 years after her murder, a witness came forward, and this witness turned in her own father. Shirley McQueen was 7 when she and her father, Kenneth Richmond, were passing through Martinsville. He lived in Hendricks County, where he worked on a farm, and he had ties to the Ku Klux Klan. McQueen told the Indiana State Police investigators she'd witnessed the slaying, and they believed her because she mentioned Jenkins was wearing a yellow scarf. And that was not in the public. They had not released the part of her wearing a yellow scarf to the public at all. McQueen recalled her father and another man who was with them that night saying that Jenkins Davis got what she deserved. Richmond was 70 and living in an Indianapolis nursing home when he was arrested and charged with murder. He was declared incompetent to stand trial, and he died of cancer 4 months after his arrest. He was in police custody on his deathbed. He confessed to Jenkins Davis murder with a nod of his head. So it's like, yeah, there's like a little bit of justice, but there's not full justice, because her case still remains open because he had a accomplice. There was one other person with them, and that other person has never been brought to light. And just think about it. If this woman had never came forward and said what she seen when she was a little girl, there would be no closure at all. At least the family gets, somewhat closure. It's sick. So the narrative of Martinsville continues to be, we are a racist, bigoted community, said Joanne Stutkin, who had no idea of Martinsville history when she moved there in 1990 to study folklore at Indiana University in nearby Bloomington. Her realtor said something about rednecks, but the PhD student from Minnesota didn't know what the word meant. Stutkin now serves as the Morgan County historian and is quick to notice slights to her adopted hometown. She notes, for instance, an IU student's recently circulated online petition to remove from a school building part of a mural that depicts the state's once heavy Klan presence. Originally, the petition stated that Martinsville, just 20 miles north of Bloomington, is the headquarters of the KKK. While Martinsville, like most Indiana towns in the 1920s, had a large Klan membership, it's definitely not true that they were the headquarters of the KKK. The reference to Martinsville was later removed from the petition. My freshman year at IU, I'd say I was from Martinsville, and people would look all worried and say, "Are you safe? Do you go out past dark?" said Nate Barrett, who's now an Indiana University sophomore and one of Martinsville's few Black residents. Barrett moved there in the 3rd grade with his mother, who is white. Barrett said once at the Circle K gas station, an elderly man looked him up and down and said, "What are you doing here?" "Just getting a Polar Pop," Barrett said, and that was that. He said, "I have run into knuckleheads, but I have never felt unsafe." And his best friends are still, two of them are from Martinsville, and he rooms with 2 of them in Bloomington. And every Thursday night, he returns to Martinsville to watch football with his friends back home. However, he does acknowledge that the behavior of certain individuals in Martinsville has bolstered the harsh popular perception. basically, this town just has a real nasty reputation. Like a really, really nasty reputation. Hey, Care Bear. I don't remember if I said hi already, but I'm saying hi again. So, a lot of the residents of this town, there's so many reports of them being like, oh, you can't judge us by one incident and this and that. But there's literally a whole history of, I am feeling better, but now I have a runny nose today. Of course, like anytime my body knows I'm about to go live, it's like, oh, let's throw a little something in there. Exactly, Kisme. It is not just a reputation. There's literally a history. Um, and here's another story. Back in 1998, which we talked about, was the probation of the. Okay, so this one says 98. The other one said 97. So 97, 98 was when the basketball team got put on probation. And then in November 2001, in the weeks after the 9/11 attacks, the town's newspaper published a letter to the editor from Martinsville Assistant Police Chief Dennis Nail, critical of Billy Buddha, Haji Hindu, and quote unquote queers. The Bloomington newspaper demanded Nail be reprimanded, but at the subsequent meeting of the Martinsville City Council, Nail was patted on the back, according to the Indianapolis Star. One of Nail's dozens of supporters who crowded into the meeting described the police officer's letter as one of the finest articles I've ever read in my entire life outside of the Bible. Yeah, sounds like they've real changed. It's disgusting. Um, Even though still to this day, though, like the current population of Martinsville, let me pull that up here, is still like mostly white. So, wow, Martinsville is 97.58% white. It's 0.61% black. Like, if that doesn't speak volumes to the residents, yeah, okay, come on. Which I had remembered hearing about Carol Jenkins' story, but for some reason I thought it had happened further south. Um, and it's actually one of the things I had read about is that a lot of people are worried about southern states, but it's actually Midwest towns that are a huge problem. like the whole oh gosh, what's the word for it? Narrative that gets pushed is that, oh, all the racism is in the South. But as I was doing my research, there are a ton of sundown towns in the Midwest. There's at least one sundown town in every state in America. How disgusting is that? And like, I didn't think that, like, of course, I knew racism still exists. But I didn't think like the sundown town was real. Like, I didn't think it was still relevant to today's times. I'm not thinking that this is something that still affects the Black population. Oh, was I wrong? And it's disgusting. So go ahead and get rid of that. Like, I think about, like, if poor Carol had not been trying to, like, because her stepfather had warned her about Martinsville, but she just wanted to make such a good impression on her employer for her first day of work. And it's just so sad. I mean, she was 20 years old. She had so much life ahead of her. And, she was only took that job because the Ford Motor Company was having a strike. If the strike hadn't happened, she wouldn't have never gone there. It's just so sad thinking of just how one slight change she'd still be here. It's just so gross. Okay, so, which, yes, for anybody that doesn't know what a sundown town is, they were more common in the 1880s through to like the 1960s, but they were towns in which Black people were not very welcomed in, but they were totally not welcome to be in that town at dark. And so it was called a sundown town because if a Black person was caught in this town after dark, horrible things happened to them, often getting beaten or lynched. It's horrible. Exactly, Kisme. She should have been able to go anywhere. It's horrible. Okay, so crap. What did I exit out of? I didn't mean to do that. One of the biggest towns that I read about that are still basically today still a sundown town is in Texas. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about this Texas town and then some of the other sundown towns in Texas. And possibly I'm thinking of going through and talking about all of the sundown places throughout America. Because I think there should be some more awareness, and it's gross. It is disgusting that my Black brothers and sisters have to, when they make a road trip, have to make sure that if they are to stop somewhere, that they're going to be welcome there or not welcome there based on the color of their skin. It is fucking gross. Yeah, kids may. I wish that was the case. That's what needs to be the case. We need to, make the changes to our country. Wow, Care Bear, that's for where you live at? So I'm going to take a quick break and check up with you guys. Oh, Victoria, I know that's so sad. I'm going to take a break really quick and catch up with you guys. And then we will come back and start and talk about Biter, Texas. Such a weird name, too. Like, I'm kind of digging into this history of these towns has been just crazy. I just I feel so much more privileged after doing this research. It's yeah, that's the best way I can describe it is I feel so much more privileged. I've like I never went on a road trip besides being worried about being a female, if I was ever by myself. But, even with my family or something, I've never been on a road trip and been like, oh, is it okay if we stop here? Because are we even allowed in this town? Like, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that we are still stuck in these times. I'm sorry that this shit still exists. You're right, Kisme. You are right. It's it's awful. Like I love our country, but oh, we still have so much work to do, and we have got to stop erasing like what happened. We need to own up and take accountability and make changes for the things that have happened. Like my past is my father's bloodline is uh, Cherokee. Um, you could actually find most of like my father's family from my grandpa side and all that are still in Tennessee. Um, and some of them actually, um, like I remember growing up and going on the reservations. I don't think the reservation was in Tennessee. It could have been Oklahoma. Gosh, I was so young. I don't even really remember, but um, I just remember being told little things growing up. And then as I learned more about stuff, um, it's just it's horrible. The white Europeans, all they did was have a history of finding land and saying mine, and doing whatever they could to get that land, whether killing, annihilating, just taking it. They didn't discover shit. They slaughtered people and stole it. And
I get so sick when I hear people talk about how, indigenous people, they don't deserve anything and this and that. But why shouldn't they? That land was not white people's to begin with. It's horrible. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, stranger. It's hard to, yep, kiss me. It's exactly. There's a lot of changes that need to be put in place. Um, just even acknowledging that this shit really happened, and not trying to whitewash everything. You know, I don't try to claim I'm, my heritage, because I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Cherokee, I'm Bohemian, Czechoslovakian actually, but Bohemian. I'm a mixed bag, but I am white presenting, and so I am white. I am white privileged, and when gosh, years back, I was one of those persons that was like, I don't have no privilege. I grew up, this way, and I grew up in the same neighborhood, and we had the same struggles, and I think it was because we grew up like together that I didn't see the racism because I wasn't racist, and they were just my family and my friends, and it wasn't until I moved out of the North area that I really realized, like, holy shit, like, it is a much, much bigger thing than I ever thought. And, I don't have to worry about getting pulled over because a cop sees me driving, my vehicle. And there's just so much things that have, happened where I've been like, wow, would that have happened to me as a white woman? Would that, and the fact that people don't understand that white privilege is not, oh, you get everything handed to you on a silver platter. That's not what white privilege means. White privilege is the fact that we can get in our car and we can drive down the street and we don't have to get, worry about being pulled over just because we're white. We don't have to walk down the sidewalk and worry about somebody crossing the street because they see, we're white walking. It's and I see it, especially living in the South now. I see it so much more, and I hate it because I don't want my children to see the hate, because that's all it is. Is it's hate, and it's horrible. I don't. I used to say that I didn't see color, and it wasn't until one of my black friends actually said, when you say that, you're actually erasing my struggles, because when you say you don't see color, you're saying you don't see me, and you don't see, acknowledge the struggles I go through. Um, and of course, I had never meant to be offensive by saying that, but people don't understand that when you do say that, it is truly offensive. And I don't say that anymore because I do see your color and I do acknowledge your struggles. And I wish I could do more. I wish I could help more. And I'm sure that, you know, there's things that I still do. that are probably microaggressions that I don't even realize, because I think most people in this day and age, especially white people, we're so accustomed to things that we may not even realize it. And it's just about being open, and being open to having a conversation and open to being educated. If a black person or a indigenous person or a minority comes up to you and says, "Hey, this is offensive," you need to stop and you need to listen. And normally, what I see is, as soon as a white person is told that, "Hey, what you're doing is offensive to me," it becomes outrageous. I'm not racist, and that might be, but what we don't realize is we're so accustomed to certain things that we may not mean it as a racist thing, but if somebody says, "Hey, this is offensive," we have got to stop being so closed-minded and offensive. Like, all I see is white people getting offended because a black person gets offended. That's not okay. We have to be able to have that conversation, and nobody wants to have that conversation. I shouldn't say nobody, but so many people I see, especially in the South, there's just that brick wall of la 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 la. I'm not racist. I have black friends. It doesn't work. Guess what? You can still be racist and have black friends. A lot of racists hide it. They keep it in the closet. Most racist people, they're not running around, doing it openly. It's it's when their kids come to school and show the hate. When their kids, come to school and they're bullying and, doing all this shit, that it comes out. One second.
But that's when the hate comes out. Is exactly. Yeah, kiss me. It's gross. It's sad. It's so damn sad. And how can we, you know, as white people or white presenting or however you want to say it, how can we non-black people say that we're not privileged? I'm not scared to walk down the street other than being a woman at times, because that's a whole nother struggle. But I'm not scared because of the color of my skin. I'm scared because I'm a woman, but I can't imagine even being a black woman, because not only are you then targeted because you're a woman, but then you're targeted because of the color of your skin. And it's sad. It's so sickening and sad. So I am going to, hey guys, share this with you guys. So, Vidor, Texas is a notorious sundown town in southern Texas. It's right outside of Houston. It's about, or not Houston, I think it's Beaumont. It's like 15 minutes from Beaumont and like 2 hours from Houston, I believe. One second, let me pull up. There's just so much about this town. It's sad. It really is. One second. Okay, so so this was a BuzzFeed article. Yes, Kisme. I totally agree, Kisme. This was a BuzzFeed news article, and it says that sundown towns are still a problem for Black drivers. It's when you veer off to the back roads that don't connect to the highway, and that's when you find yourself in trouble. When 30-year-old hiker Marco Williams journeyed from his home in Prince George's County, Maryland, to visit the Devil's Bathtub in Deep Virginia in June of last year, the outdoor enthusiast never imagined that a stop for gas would present him with a warning that potentially saved his life. In a video that has now been viewed 2.5 million times, Williams told his followers that on his return home, traveling along Route 119, he visited a small service station in Kentucky to refuel and grab some snacks. The cashier was like, "You best not be around here after dark. This is a sundown town." A sundown town, as explained by James W. Lowen, a former sociology professor at the University of Vermont and author of Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism, refers to a town, neighborhood, or community with a wholly white population created intentionally by systematically keeping out ethnic minorities. A lot of African Americans don't really travel to certain parts of the country. I did not know this. I'm being naive traveling, but they don't travel to certain parts of the country because certain people have those mindsets, Williams told BuzzFeed News. The racism and prejudice is still in those towns. The mindset from the Jim Crow era is passed down, and these people have no exposure because they don't get out. According to Lowen's rolling database, at least 60 of Kentucky's 782 towns are believed to be or previously have been considered sundown towns. But these towns aren't just in the South. They are all over the U.S. and concentrated particularly in the Midwest. Despite the phenomenon, historical references to sundown towns are few and often wrapped into tales of the expulsion of Black communities in places like Forsyth County and Anna, Illinois, which is allegedly known colloquially, I cannot say that word, to be an acronym for Ain't No N-Words Allowed. So that's what they say Anna is known, like that's what it stands for. It's an acronym for that. In her 1969 memoir, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, the late poet Maya Angelou describes Mississippi with the phrase, "Don't let the sun set on you here, N-word Mississippi." The same sentiment would appear on signage posted at city boundaries of sundown towns, making clear that Black people were not welcomed and risked their lives if they dared to defy the decree. Last year, the concept was portrayed on the premiere episode of HBO's Lovecraft County, in which the three protagonists are forced to flee a town while being stalked by a police officer. Activist organizations have used the term more recently. In 2017, the NAACP issued a travel warning for the entire state of Missouri, a first for the organization. The decision was in response to a bill designed to limit discrimination lawsuits by making changes to the Missouri Human Rights Act. Senate Bill number 43 would require employees prove that their protected characteristics were a motivating factor for being discriminated against when previously the requirement was that simply showed it was a contributing factor. Horrible. The NAACP also referenced anecdotal examples of hate crimes and data which showed Black motorists were 75% more likely to be pulled over and stopped and searched by police enforcement than their white counterparts. 75% more likely. How can you say there's no privilege? Come on now. The state of Missouri offered no public response to the NAACP, but did make a Black woman the face of its tourism campaign last year. Of course, they would put a Black woman as their token. Disgusting. And in 2020, a group called the Defund San Antonio Police Department Coalition issued a travel warning for San Antonio, labeling the city as a sundown town. A travel advisory has been issued to warn that any Black people in or traveling to San Antonio use increased caution when visiting the city due to the city's policing policies that put Black lives in danger, wrote organizers in a press release. Today, the legacy of sundown towns continues to cast a shadow on the tradition of the Great American Road Trip, creating additional challenges for Black motorists who dare to journey off the beaten path. Williams had took up hiking as a hobby in response to the pandemic in June 2020, is when he made the 7-hour journey by road with a non-Black friend to visit Virginia's hidden gem, the Devil's Bathtub. When I usually travel, I'm going to cities like New York, Miami, Atlanta, majorly populated cities. I wanted to get in touch with my nature side, and I wanted to explore the rural American South, said Williams. Love you, stranger. Have a good night. In recent years, the angst of being a Black motorist has been captured with the hashtag driving while Black, as Americans flock to the open roads in a bid to reclaim their summer after more than a year of restrictions. The freedom and excitement of the road trip isn't without caveats for minorities looking to venture to less diverse destinations. En route, there were a bunch of Confederate flags, a lot of Make America Great Again flags. There's even a few Klan lounges in South Carolina that we came across, said Williams. It's when you veer off to the back roads that don't connect to the highway. That's when you find yourself in trouble. And it sucks because the hiking spots are in these backwooded areas like West Virginia and Kentucky. Williams said he didn't believe the cashier who suggested he leave town before sundown did so with malicious intent. I don't think she was being racist toward me. If anything, I got the energy that she was looking out for me, so I believed her, and I got out of there. Rather than challenge the convention and try his luck, Williams and his companion quickly got on with their journey back to Maryland, because dead men tell no tales, and despite the experience, he said he would be down to do it all over again, but he would definitely be cautious. It's sad. Like, it's really, really sad. Yeah, I didn't even know about that with San Antonio either, Victoria. So now we're going to talk about Vidor. I think it's Vidor, Texas. Vidor is a city in western Orange County, Texas, United States. A city of southeast Texas, it lies at the intersection of I-10 and Farm to Market Road 105. It's 6 miles east of Beaumont, and the town is mainly a bedroom community for the nearby refining complexes in Beaumont and Port Arthur, and is part of the Beaumont-Port Arthur Metropolitan Statistical Area. Its population was 9,789 at the 2020 census. The area was heavily logged after the construction of the Texarkana and Fort Smith Railway that was later part of a line that ran from Kansas City to Port Arthur, Texas. The city was named after lumberman Charles Shelton Vidor, owner of the Miller-Vidor Lumber Company and father of director King Vidor. By 1909, the Vidor community had a post office, and 4 years later, a company tram road was built. Almost all Vidor residents worked for the company. In 1924, the Miller-Vidor Company moved to Lakeview, just north of Vidor, in search of virgin timber. A small settlement remained, and the Miller-Vidor subdivision was laid out in 1929. Vidor had a reputation as a sundown town in 2018. In a sunset town, African Americans aren't allowed after sunset. But in 2021, Vidor changed this rule because of the negative feedback from people around Orange County. Oh, the negative feedback. So this town had a literal law in place that African Americans, Black people, were not allowed in the city or in their town after dark up until 2021. 1 year ago, guys. It's 2022. It's mind-blowing. So the population of Vidor as of 2020 was 8,671 white folk, 39 Black folks, 47 Native American, 50 Asian, 11 other, 294 mixed, and 677 Hispanic or Latino. Yeah. So, one second, y'all. So, Vidor really became put on the map when in is this it? Okay, go away. Sorry, y'all. Okay, so Vidor was always predominantly white, and in 1993, the federal government tried to put a oh my gosh, what is the word? Sorry guys, I'm having what is the word of it? Okay, so in 1993, the federal government tried to change years of racial separation, and they decided to, I guess they had like an actual segregation bill in place. And so the federal government, not state, mind you, remember, this is federally, they tried to um, diversify the public housing. So, like so many former battlegrounds, Vider's public housing project was once pleasant and innocuous. As such places go, it has little in common with the cramped high-rise dungeons that have become the pathetic cliches of America's failed efforts to provide shelter for those in need. Built 40 or so years ago and refurbished in the past decade, it consists of 74 small brick duplexes shaded by a grove of pines. The residents, for the most part, keep their tiny lawns neat and decorate their cement porches with hanging baskets, and there is a playground for the children. For the longest time, people here got along. Many of the tenants had grown up in or near Vider, and they had become even closer as they endured the contempt the rest of the population harbored toward people in the project. Here, everyone was in the same boat. Everybody knew everybody's business, says Ross Dennis, a former resident who now lives in exile in Arkansas. We knew who looked in windows at night, who sold dope, and who paid what in rent. But when federal judge William Wayne Justice shattered the peace of the project, and not at all coincidentally, the town of Vider itself. For more than 5 decades, Vider had been all white, and the government had decided it was time for a change. To resolve a 13-year-old housing discrimination suit, Justice ordered that Vider's project, along with projects in 35 other Texas counties, be desegregated. So not only was it in Vider, it was in 35 other Texas counties where public housing was segregated. Think about how disgusting that is. And this was in 93. At risk was future federal funding of public housing in those regions. Of course, it always boils down to money. The decree seemed to come out of another era when blacks were forbidden equal access to everything from the lunch counter to the voting booth and the job site. But then life in Vider also appeared frozen in time. Not only were there no blacks in Vider, but there was no trace of black culture. In Vider, there was no Martin Luther King Boulevard, as there was in Beaumont and Orange and Houston. There were no black beauty products in the drugstore, no copies of Ebony or Jet, no black churches, no black civil officials, lawyers, doctors, garbage men, no black high school students, teachers, waitresses, cashiers, or shoppers. Most days, the only black people in town were on the TV. Blacks had been permanently driven out of Vider 70 years ago, and for that effort, the town had earned an enduring label as a bastion of white supremacy, or as it would be called by the Houston Chronicle when the crisis began, a Klan stronghold, or as it would be called by the New York Times when the crisis deepened, a hotbed of Klan activity. As framed by the media, this belated attempt by the federal government to integrate Vider Okay, Gizme, I will definitely look that up. As framed by the media, this belated attempt by the federal government to integrate Vider had little to do with the seemingly hopeless racial problems of contemporary Los Angeles or New York. It seemed instead to echo the civil rights struggles of the 60s. It was a simple story of good versus evil. The government would use its might to break the back of racism in an ignorant, hateful place. There might be angry demonstrations, violent confrontations, and numerous arrests in Vidor, but ultimately a citizen's right to live where he pleased would be upheld. Racism would lose and America would win. But that's not what happened. What should have been another success story became instead a chronicle of failure, having as much to do with good intentions as bad ones. In its simplest form, the narrative went like this. Early this year, the Orange County Public Housing Authority, which is funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, attempted to desegregate the Vidor site, as it was ordered to do. The result of the relocation of 2 single black women with 5 children between them and 2 single black men was several months of terror at the hands of various white supremacist groups, unrelenting negative news coverage of the town, and as of last September, the restoration of Vidor to its monochromatic state. The black people who had been relocated to Vidor had relocated themselves right back out again. And one of them, a restless idealist by the name of Bill Simpson, was murdered in the process. Finally, in an unprecedented move, HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros seized control of Vidor's project from the Housing Authority, vowing that his agency would try again soon. Which we're going to look into the murder of Bill Simpson too. What went largely unrecognized throughout this battle was that the events in Vidor might reveal less about who we were than who we are becoming. That it might say more about our balkanized future than our segregated past. As a great many Vidorians pointed out, their town is surrounded by places where the absence of blacks has not been a cause célèbre. Cities like Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange, the points of the so-called Golden Triangle, have hefty black populations, but many smaller towns in the region do not. Nederland, with 16,192 people, has 88 black people. Bridge City, with 8,034 people, has 19. Mauriceville, with 2,046, has 12. Lumberton, with 6,640, has 2. African-American separatist Eric Muhammad, a guest on an October 1992 Donahue devoted to the situation in Vidor, would not see in those numbers a clarion call for integration. The attempt to coexist peacefully, black and white, hasn't worked, he declared on the show. I take the position that it's not feasible to move people into an area where they are not wanted, will not be respected, and therefore we are ultimately sentencing them to a death because they are going into a very hostile environment. It's insane to move families there just for funding and not give a damn about the families once they arrive. Exactly. Once integration was regarded as the supreme goal of the civil rights movement, opening America's neighborhoods and schools and workplaces to minorities, we believed, would end racial inequities. But almost 40 years after the civil rights movement began with Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott, and after no small amount of progress has been made, profound racial divisions remain, mirrored in arguments over everything from class to crime, from education to birth rates. A once indomitable government seems paralyzed in a policy bog of its own, unable to grasp the scope of the problem, much less propose solutions. Seen in this light, the Vidor story changes shape and emphasis. It is no longer a simple fable of a racist town, but a very complicated tragedy of a society that has lost its way and doesn't even know which racial idea to pursue. Hate had a beautiful day when the white supremacist nationalist movement came to host their victory in Vider celebration. A little more than a month had passed since the last Black person had been driven out of the housing project. The weather was still warm for mid-October, the sky a dauntless blue. Onlookers began pulling into Wood's grocery store parking lot across from City Hall long before the scheduled 2 o'clock rally. Ignoring pleas from civic officials to stay away, the event was the culmination of months of legal wrangling. Attorneys for the Nationalists had threatened to sue if their clients were not allowed to demonstrate, and then they threatened to sue if their clients were not afforded proper security. The cost to the already strapped town of Vider was more than $50,000, with the tab still running. Even locals sympathetic to the nationalist cause were coming to suspect that they were not saviors. In fact, in the weeks preceding the march, the 12,000 or so residents of Vider seemed to have unified against all outsiders. The Nationalists from Mississippi were just the latest group of white supremacists to descend on the town since the integration efforts began, and the good people of Vider had had enough. Enough of the media slamming them as racist, enough of the racists and their First Amendment rights, enough of Henry Cisneros, but most of all, they were sick to death of everyone's exploiting Vider for their own ends. To many in Vider, the good name of their town had been soiled by an inaccurate press and an overzealous government. The fallout from the integration effort was costing them, and they wanted it all to go away. Interstate 10 travelers now bought gas in Beaumont or Orange rather than stop in Vider, and anxious business associates called from as far away as Singapore to ask about the situation. One local attorney felt compelled to reveal her Vider roots during jury selection in Beaumont so that the opposing side couldn't mention it later. Vider high school students left their letter jackets at home when they competed against other schools. They were afraid of reprisals. At a city council meeting in late September, citizens poured into City Hall to demand that local government refuse to grant the Nationalists a parade permit. One by one, speakers rose to the microphone, many more closely resembling yuppies than the racist crackers portrayed by the national media. If you grant this permit, you betray the city of Vider, declared one man. 90% of the people in Vider oppose this parade. His statement was inspiring, but unfortunately a bit optimistic. Civic leaders frequently refer to Vider as a bedroom community, and indeed, Vider has, over the years, made the transition from small town to Beaumont suburb. It boasts some large, comfortable homes that would not be out of place in Houston or Dallas, but they are the exception, not the rule. Bedroom community, it should be remembered, can also be a euphemism for no jobs. Vider has an 11% unemployment rate. It has none of the charming historic structures that link this part of Texas more closely to the south than to the west. The battered shacks and rusting trailers ringing the outskirts of town are small monuments to the failure and disappointment. Main Street is comprised largely of fast food chains and gas stations that serve I-10 traffic. Walmart, Wieners, and Price Low Foods are there for the locals. In this atmosphere of poverty and isolation, the old Vider has continued to thrive. That particular Vider, the one that better heeled and better educated citizens would rather forget, is best observed, as a great many reporters discovered, at Gary's Coffee Shop. Situated in a Main Street shopping center just off I-10, Gary's is a vestige of that time when the Ku Klux Klan ruled the town. Here is where old-looking men with no place to go take long pulls on their cigarettes and chew over the day's news. A pastor who has taken to drink, an uncle who waited up for his wife with 38, and of course the people who are regularly referred to as riggers. And I think because it's near Port Arthur and Beaumont, where there's a lot of oil rigs, which is another reason I think this town is still so populated, because it's cheaper for people to live out there. But disgusting. At Gary's, it is possible to hear men argue about who is or not in the Klan, to see men greet each other jokingly with a white power salute, to hear a man say that he was thinking about, oh, never mind, okay. There I go, being naive again. I thought when they were saying riggers, they were talking about the oil riggers. That is not what they were saying. Oh my God. I apologize. Hearing a man say that he was thinking about the riggers, oh my God, while he was out hunting for UFOs. This spider was not invented by the media, as some Vidorians would assert. It exists, and it is one that remains embedded in the consciousness of most Texans and most racists. Just as Vider became a symbol to the federal government, it also became a symbol to the white supremacists. If they could not triumph in Vider, their reasoning went, they couldn't win anywhere. Oh gosh. Sorry, y'all. I really thought they were talking about the oil rig folks because of Port Arthur and Beaumont. Yep. Again, white privilege. That is not something that I would think about. Yeah. Mm. So basically, the white supremacists won, and they held their march. And yeah, and Vider literally just held on to its racist past and its racist future. Like that, um, I believe that was in 1993 that they held that march. Yeah, it was 1993 they held that march. Okay, so this is a um, article from 2006, but this is just um, this is a current resident. I don't know if they're still current, but I mean 2006 wasn't that long ago. And this is again their current people that say they're not racist, they're not this, they're not that. So it goes. uh, We've been trying to live down something for 40 to 50 years, said Orange County Commissioner Beeman Mitten. Once convicted, you're a convicted felon. You can't ever put that aside. One second, guys. 1 second, y'all. Give me just a second, y'all. I'm going to get my little one some milk. I'll be right back. All right, sorry guys. Yeah, he did. He did have a night terror. Poor baby. He always has it. That's mama life, right? All right, sorry guys. Where was I? Okay. Um, Charles Jones is a 62-year-old African American man who lives in Beaumont. He told us that when he was 19, he and three of his black friends were changing a flat tire on their broken down car in Vidor one night. A white policeman had stopped. He said, "Well, let me tell you, you boys better wrap up and get out of here because I'm going to go to that next exit and come back around. You better be gone." Vidor also has a reputation as a haven for the Ku Klux Klan. Uh, Jones recalls seeing a Klan rally in Vidor when he was a child. Vidor city officials point that doesn't mean the rally was filled with Vidor residents. They say the Klan brought members from all over and targeted Vidor for rallies. Yeah, that's their excuse. And of course, when the federal government um, changed the racial separation laws, and uh, two black families moved in. And guess what? And after a couple months, the two black families moved right back out. And it says Vidor officials acknowledge that racism is still present in Vidor, but they also say it is a very different place from one it was decades ago. Yeah, only because you can't go around lynching people still. But just because you don't actively murder and harm black folks doesn't mean that you're different. You just can't get away with some of the shit you would like to. God, this enrages me. I'm sorry, guys. Uh, it says last year, for example, Vidor schools posted a billboard which included the face of an African American girl as a way to attract black families. City leaders also point out that Vidor reached out to African American victims of Hurricane Katrina and provided temporary shelter. And this is a comment from their mayor, Joe Hopkins. The vast majority of our citizens are not racist. We'd welcome anybody here who is a good, solid citizen. Huh. And it goes, indeed, I was left with a genuine impression that some Vidor residents wanted the city to welcome other ethnicities, but when I sat down in a cafe and talked to residents, I also heard the sound of prejudice. Peggy Frug told me she'd welcome blacks to her neighborhood, but then she said this: I don't mind being friends with them, talking and stuff like that. But as far as mingling and eating with them, all that kind of stuff, that's where I draw the line. Yeah. Yeah, they're not still racist at all. Oh no. Fucking disgusting. All right, then I got one last thing to share with y'all about Vidor. And this has actually happened in May of this year. What you doing, little one? Uh-oh. Puppy dog's running around. You know what that means. Rocket's loose. What you doing? He's about to start running around causing havoc. All right, so um, a black truck driver shared the story of his night in Vidor, Texas, a notorious sundown town. And he goes, my night in a sundown town. Black truck driver Gideon captioned a video about his stopover in Vidor. His TikTok from May 3rd has been viewed over 875,000 times. The trucker explained that he was delivering a load to the area. I get there and I look at the exit, he said. I'm like, wait a minute. It took me to exit 861A, and for those who don't know, it's a place called Vidor, Texas. Gideon said he had heard stories about the town. Pretty much everybody I know in Texas that's black tells me do not go to Vidor. Still, it was about 5:30 p.m. and his load did not deliver until 8 a.m. the following day. While driving to the company destination, he saw a bunch of Confederate flags and the doll of a black man wrapped in a Confederate flag hanging from a tree by his neck. When Gideon got to the site, he heard a security guard alerting coworkers to a code red. On a phone call, he said the guard could be heard saying that he did not want to be responsible for this guy's safety because we stopped taking loads at 4 o'clock. Shortly after, another man arrived and quickly unloaded Gideon's truck. He told the driver, dude, you might want to get up out of here as soon as possible. We're at Sundown. You want to leave here now. Don't stop until you at least get to Beaumont. Gideon asked whether there were police in the area, but the man told him that police turn a blind eye. The driver took his advice and headed to Beaumont, where he slept with a rifle. So I'm going to share his video on here. 1 second.
Yo, let me tell y'all as quickly as I can about my night in a sundown town. Excuse me. Yes, I said that correctly. A sundown town. 2022, a sundown town. For those who don't know what a sundown town is, look it up on Google. But anyway, so I get a load going to a particular city in Texas, and I'm like, okay, well, let me head on over here and drop this off. They're gonna pay me this much. That's perfect. I like that. It's a quick 200 miles, make it quick, whatever the amount was. Great, cool. I get there and I look at the exit. I'm like, wait a minute. It took me to exit 861A. For those who don't know, it's a place called Vidor, Texas, Vidor, Vidor. I'm like, uh-oh, I've heard stories. Like pretty much everybody I know in Texas that's black tells me, do not go to Vidor, Texas. I'm like, okay. Yet here I was in Vidor, Texas. My load didn't deliver until this morning. This is from the perspective of yesterday. Didn't deliver until tomorrow at 8. It was like 5:30. So I get to the place. I'm not giving names of companies or anything like that. But while I'm driving to the place, I see trailer parks. I see a bunch of Confederate flags. I saw a doll of a black man. It was just a doll wrapped in a Confederate flag hanging from a tree by its neck. That's the type of stuff I saw in Vidor, Texas, which led me to believe that the reputation was fairly earned. I get there. The security guard says, hey, we got a code red. The guy gets on the phone, is like, hey, I can't, I don't want to be responsible for this guy's safety. Let me go ahead and find somebody because we stopped taking loads at 4 o'clock. But I'll get somebody over here from the other side of the plant. Tell them to hang on. So I hang on. I'm doing what I got to do. Finally, somebody comes by about 15 minutes later. The guy said, let me hurry up and get you unloaded. He quickly gets me unloaded. And they say, dude, you might want to get up out of here as soon as possible. We're at sundown. You want to leave here now. Don't stop until you at least get to Beaumont. I was like, okay. He's like, no, seriously. I said, well, what about the police? Why aren't the police there? Police turned a blind eye. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do what you said. He said, yeah, man, I don't want to see you get in any trouble. So I went ahead and I took off, headed to Beaumont. I went to the Petro in Beaumont, slept there, and I had my Armalite rifle 15 with me. Slept with a couple of extra magazines, but I'm safe, y'all. But that was my night in the Sundown.
Isn't that awful? So that is, oh, CP. I had to pick him up because, of course, he started barking. Yeah, it is. It's horrible and disgusting, and it's awful that this is 2022 and we still have this problem. This is America, for God's sakes. And we still have this problem here. Racism still exists in America, and not just in little forms. We're talking Black people cannot be in certain towns. What the hell is wrong with it? Ugh. It's gross. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to be done talking about this topic. Because when I dug into it, it's horrible, the amount of sundown places that still exist. Will you quit? Will you quit? Why are you being so obnoxious? No. Rocket. You think you're the star of the show, don't you? I should name this, Rocket Show, because he thinks it's always about him. Don't you? Oh, Lucy, go ahead. He just wants to eat mommy's earrings and necklace like he always does. So, this is the last thing I'm kind of going to go through. And it talks about I know I'm very scared about our next election too, Care Bear. And yeah, he would have. I fully believe he would have been terrorized, Kisme, which is fucking scary. So there is Alba, Texas. And Alba is a small sundown town in northeast Texas with a population of just under 500. The town was founded in 1843 and has always been an all-white community. In 2000, the town made headlines for being 98.6% white. Theories on how the community got its name differ, but a popular one claims the town's name is derived from the Latin word for white and was named because settlers did not permit African Americans to live there. Alvin, Texas. Alvin is a city in Brazoria County, Texas, with a population of approximately, 27,000 people, with about 1,000 of them being Black. In 1933, Roy S. Lapham was murdered in a mysterious axe slaying on Christmas morning. The suspect was a Black man, but citizens refused to believe that theory because practically no Black folks are allowed to live in Alvin, and that Lapham's home was near the Mexican quarter of the town, as stated in the Galveston Daily News. Such a random thing thrown in there. Comanche County, Texas. Comanche County is home to many sundown towns in Texas. It started when Moses Jones, a Black man in Comanche County, killed 2 white and 2 Black children, then set fire to his white employer's home in 1875. He was arrested and shot. The people of Comanche County determined that this was a unique situation and that all other Blacks would be allowed to stay in the area. In 1886, a Comanche Black man killed a white woman. He was immediately lynched, and a meeting of all white citizens came together to discuss the future of their towns. They determined that 2 killings by black men of white people were too much, so they proposed to eliminate the black population from their town. African Americans were given a few days to get out of the county. Signs were posted around the town that black people were not welcome, and if they were caught in the area after dark, it would not end well for them. By 1900, I think my mouse died. There we go. By 1900, the census showed that of a 23,000 population, every single person was white. What is going on? It is. Give me 1 second. I gotta grab my charger. Okay. A news clipping from the Courier Journal discusses the exile of blacks in Comanche from the perspective of a white man, and whether a new town should consider the exile as well. Our people, white people, of course, gave N-words all the morals they have. I lived in a county in Texas where N-word were not allowed to live except one family. I couldn't ask such folk, brave white Americans, to do my little bachelor chores. I mean, the running of errands and 100 little things that we don't hesitate to ask a N-word to do. Oh, I missed the N-word and never want to be without them as a servant. Fucking gross. Ugh. Yeah, Kiss May, definitely. If you email that to me, I will definitely watch it. Oh, Care Bear, that's awful. Rocket, come here. I'm gonna end up having to give him a treat just to keep him to shut up. Hang on 1 second, guys. Oh my goodness. Rocket. I swear he's figured out that if he's obnoxious, that mommy will give him a treat to shut him up. Smart dog. He's like, oh, if I wake up and I start getting in trouble, mommy's gonna give me a treat. Oh, I wish I had more USB spots on this computer, but I don't. Okay. All right, let me go back. All right. Comanche, Texas. Comanche, Texas itself is worth mentioning as a sundown town in Texas, as there is a long history of racism and violence against African Americans. The town was founded in 1856, and by 1860, all of the town's residents were white. In 1940, a Sundown Town book by James Loewen mentions that an organization in Comanche proudly said that their town was the home of the purest Anglo-Saxon population of any county in the United States. Today, there are very few. How would they put that in an article that was wrote not that long ago? This article literally says today there are very few colored people in the town. I do not understand why they would write it that way when it's like 2022. It should say today there are very few people of color that live in this town. Many black children who grow up in Comanche often wish there were more black kids. In a July 2000 interview, Talila Harlman talks about how she felt alone in the crowd. If there was a party, she often wasn't invited. Even if her classmates wanted to, their parents wouldn't allow it. There was no one to really relate to and no hairstylist who could do her hair. She grew up being told that sometimes life is difficult and you just have to deal with it. God, that's heartbreaking. Yeah, my email is just through the looking glass wrayan@gmail.com. DeLeon, Texas. DeLeon is one of, yeah, exactly, Care Bear. That was so gross. DeLeon is one of the sundown towns in Texas linked to Comanche County. This sundown town in Texas was also all white and had signs that said racial slurs telling blacks to stay out of town. They expelled their black population in 1886. Elmo, Texas. A news article from Weekly Charlotte Observer explains why Elmo, Texas adopted a sundown town mindset. Whereas the race problem is of momentous importance to the Southern people, being one that must be solved sometime, and in view of the unprecedented number of recent outrages by black brutes on white children and women. Whereas N-word immigrants are pouring in upon us with an increase of ratio, which, if not stopped, will result in ruin to our schools and society. And whereas we have in our midst a class of colored citizens that is a menace to society and that prevent a desirable class of white people locating with us. It is the judgment of this meeting that no N-word immigrant be given any home in our midst, and that the objectionable ones be peacefully, quiet, and lawfully removed from us as soon as the present crop is harvested. God. Leggett, Texas. The small community of 500 residents has a history for setting curfews for Black Americans and forbidding them from church meetings and using the railroad station or post office around 1919. Sour Lake, Texas, known for having one of the biggest sinkholes in Texas and the first oil well by the Texas Company. This small 1770 resident town is one of the oldest surviving towns in Hardin County. It was declared a sundown town in Texas around 1903 and promoted violent exiles of blacks from the area. Oh my gosh. Come on, mouse. Roxy, stop. Terrell, Texas, which Terrell is not that far from me. It's like 45-minute drive, maybe. So gross. Incorporated in 1874, Terrell was another sundown town that did not allow African Americans to live there. The Weekly Charlotte Observer mentions in Terrell also very few N-words are barely tolerated, and in many sections everything is done to discourage N-word immigration. And then we have Vidor, Texas, which we already talked about. And then there's Woden, Texas. Like other sundown towns, Woden, Texas was an all-white community that didn't allow African Americans to live there. Unincorporated with about 137 people, according to the 2000 census, Woden is still not a very welcoming place to people of color. Conclusion. While the Jim Crow era has long since passed, and many laws prohibit discrimination based on race, there are still some cultural sundown towns in Texas that exist today. These towns have a history of expelling or not allowing African Americans and other minorities to live there, and in some cases, the town's culture has not changed much since then. If you are a person of color, it is important to be aware of these towns and their histories before visiting or moving to them. So, that is a little bit of the history of some of the sundown towns in Texas. I believe there's still even more than that. But as far as I know, the most active and the most popular one out there is Vidor, Texas. That's the one that's the most in the news, and just it's gross. It really is. It's truly disgusting. There's just no excuse for it. Exactly, Care Bear. We are all brothers and sisters. There's no place for this hate. It doesn't belong. It does just, I don't get it. I don't understand how you can look at somebody and just automatically hate them for the color of their skin. I don't get it. Judge somebody based on their actions. Judge somebody, on how they live. Just what type of person they are. If they live, like a horrible person, then hate them. But it just doesn't make any sense to me to have this much hate in the world. No, that's gross. That's awful. And I feel so sorry for my Black brothers and sisters. I'm truly sorry that you guys have to still go through this stuff. Never would I have thought that you'd have to worry about driving somewhere where you would have to stop for gas. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that this stuff still exists. That's about it for tonight, guys. I was thinking of Rocket, stop. Closing down and possibly coming back up and doing a Friday night chat if anybody wants to do that. But that way I don't have to trim the video or anything. We can do a separate chat on a different. You guys let me know. You guys heading to bed? Or you guys staying up? I'm sorry, Care Bear. That's really awful. Rocket's being ridiculous. Thank you, Kisme. I still have much to learn, and I'm definitely not by no means perfect when it comes to things. I think every day is a learning experience. But because I have so many friends and family that I love, and I don't, I watch people I love go through shit because of the color of their skin, you know. It makes me want to be a better person and want to learn, you know, how we can help, how we can change. You know, I haven't always been open to certain things. I would definitely would be, you know, closed-minded sometimes, but I think that came from where I, you know, lived, because it was just, you know, we all grew up the same, and so it just wasn't something I ever thought about. But living in Texas these last 10 years has definitely been very eye-opening and changed a lot of the way I thought about things, and continue to think about things. I mean, I didn't know sundown towns were still a thing until this week. It's 2022. Like, it's awful. It's horrible. And I'm just sorry. I'm so sorry that, you know, minorities and indigenous, that you guys all have to go through this. I really am. But I think Tia's still alive. I may go back over there, or maybe I'll see if Tia wants to do a little Friday night chat or something. But exactly, Kisme. We are all human, all of us. But I think I'm going to close this down, and I may see if Tia wants to do like a little Friday night chat or something, and we'll see. All right. All I can say is do better, be better, keep your mind open, love one another. Just love one another. We all matter. We all bleed red, you know. Oh, did I say she for Rocket? I might have. But yeah, Rocket's a boy, but the other ones are girls. I love you guys. Everybody have an amazing night. Bye.